It almost seems inevitable in wrestling that when a tag team is formed, they're eventually going to split up. And that usually means at least one member will get a big singles push. Obviously then, there are a lot of great acts like this in WWE today, all waiting for their chance at solo success. But who are the biggest examples of this? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at right now, starting with Montez Ford. Yes, ever since the Street Profits first rose to prominence back on NXT during the late 2010s, it was clear that while they were great as an act, and while Angelo Dawkins could go himself, the real money long-term was going to be in a Montez Ford solo run. Why was that? Well, he's by all accounts the better in-ring performer of the two, he has a great look, and certainly has the it factor. Really, all the way through the Street Profits NXT run, this was clear as whenever Ford got that hot tag, fans' interest peaked. And that's a big part of the reason the pair became one-time tag team champions down on the developmental brand. But it wasn't just in NXT they'd find success. No, ever since moving up to the main roster, the Street Profits have also become three-time tag team champions across Raw and SmackDown. Really, the only question left now is when will the time come for WWE to realize they've gotten all they can out of the duo and that it's Montez's time to shine as a solo act instead? It could happen as soon as this year, and if it does, you can bet the Chicago native will be ready for it, as this is the moment he's been waiting for, the moment where he can finally have the spotlight all to himself and show why he deserves a chance to be a singles act. Hell, there's every possibility that if Triple H ever decides to pull the trigger on such a plan in the near future, we could be looking at Montez Ford as an Intercontinental or United States champion by the time the year is over. And if his wife is holding gold of her own at that point, that really will make them a modern-day king and queen of WWE in many ways. Or who knows, given the shifting around back and forth of wrestlers again now, maybe the four-time tag team champion decides to have that solo run somewhere else. After all, it wouldn't be the first time wrestlers had jumped ship over the last few years. One person we don't see going anywhere other than WWE for his inevitable solo run, though, would be our next subject, the man who goes by the name of Stax. Why is that? Well, because chanting Stax Lorenzo is a gimmick which is pretty tailor-made for WWE, what with it being a very clear attempt to parody the kind of mob character you'd find on things like The Sopranos or Goodfellas. And what's more, it's a complete WWE creation. That's right, prior to joining the TKO-owned promotion in 2022, Stax would work under the less cartoonish name of Jake Tucker. Obviously, though, this would all change when he signed on the dotted line with Triple H and was from there shipped down to NXT, where he'd be added to the family, a stable of wise guys led by Tony D'Angelo, as now with a whole new character, he became a completely different performer in every way. Would this change work out well for his career? Well, it would certainly see him get a lot more TV time as he became a prominent figure on the NXT roster in the years which followed. That said, one thing it is yet to see him do is truly go it solo. Or at least this was the case until WrestleMania week, as it was here that during the six-man tag pitting the family against the Dark State at Stand and Deliver on April 19th, 2025, Stax would turn his back on D'Angelo and formally shift his allegiance to the heel side of the alignment chart. Obviously then, this means that solo push we all hoped he'd get one day is finally about to begin. And while it's early days yet, so we can't fully make a judgment on how it's going to go, we expect bright things in the immediate future of the Raleigh native. Sure, there will be an adjustment process, as up until now, most of Stax's work has seen him take part in the tag team division alongside his stablemates. But with things changing, everything is suddenly up in the air for him. Why has this move happened now? Well, we can only assume Shawn Michaels must have been aware of how much potential he had, as, if you look at the matches which have taken place at NXT live events in the weeks and months leading up to this turn, Stax was already dipping his toe in such waters. Yes, in recent months, Stax was getting more one-on-one matches at house shows, and this should have been the giveaway that WWE saw him as the breakout star of the family and were preparing him for that singles run. Come on now, we can all see a future where, in the not-too-distant future, Channing Lorenzo moves up to Raw or SmackDown and there makes an immediate play for a mid-card title like the IC or US strap. It just seems like the next logical step for him. The only question is, will it happen this year, or will it happen sometime after that? We guess we'll just have to wait and see. One person we won't have to play the game of wait and see with when it comes to the success of their solo run, however, is our next subject, and that's because when we talk about Johnny Gargano, we've technically already seen his. Sure, it's yet to happen on the main roster, but to this day, the saga of DIY may be the greatest story the developmental brand has told. After all, so successful were the duo made up of Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa back during the mid to late 2010s, and so beloved were they by fans because of this, it cut like a knife when they broke up in May of 2017, when the latter turned on the former. Still, even if this was painful to see, we did get a great feud coming out of it, one which went on for over a year as both men sought to come out on top over the other. And once it was done and Johnny Wrestling was standing tall, it seemed like it was going to be a solo future for the babyface. But that wouldn't be where his future lay as it happened, because not long after getting called up to the main roster in 2022, Gargano would be paired back up with Ciampa, as we were all led to believe that they'd put their differences aside and decided to work together again in order to conquer the tag team divisions on both Raw and SmackDown. Obviously, though, given their history together, everyone assumed it would only be a matter of time before the whole thing blew up once more, with some even speculating that Triple H was just going to replay the exact same storyline all over again. And while this hasn't happened as of the time of this video's recording, there is still a pretty good chance it will before all is said and done. That said, if WWE are planning on pulling the trigger on a Johnny Gargano solo run on the main roster, they'd better do it quickly, because with him now being 37, he's no spring chicken anymore, and it would be better to maximize what he has before he gets too old and injured to go at full steam anymore. Yes, the reality is that if he's given the ball to run with, Johnny Wrestling is good enough that he'll easily be able to overcome any perceived sized-imposed limitations which might be placed in front of him. Hell, we can easily see him becoming an underdog hero in the vein of a Daniel Bryan, who has several runs with one of the mid-card titles within the next year or two. Who knows? Maybe if the stars align in just the right way, he could even get a run with something like the World Heavyweight title. But let's move away from the men for now and over to the women's division instead, as it's there we find our next subject, someone who's currently a part of a stable but who has all the skills required to be a solo star. That's right, it's time for us to talk about Kairi Sane. Of course, anyone who's been following Kairi's career will be all too aware that she's a very capable singles wrestler. Hell, back in her native Japan, where she first rose to prominence as a member of the Stardom roster, she'd be a one-time red belt champion, one-time white belt champion, winner of the 2015 5-Star Grand Prix, and someone generally considered to be part of the trifecta of people who helped build that company alongside Io Shirai and Mayu Iwatani. Even when she made the jump over to WWE full-time in 2017, she stood out as a solo act in NXT when she won the NXT Women's title. And that's not even getting into her later return to Stardom, where she became the inaugural IWGP Women's Champion. That said, for most of her time since 2017, Kairi has been part of the tag team division, usually alongside her fellow countrywoman Asuka as part of either the Kabuki Warriors or Damage Control. Could this ever change in the future? Of course it could. Hell, Triple H knows all too well how good Kairi is and how much she has to offer as a singles act. Sure, she may have often gotten outshone on the main roster by Io Sky, but that doesn't mean there can't be room for both of them to have a spot in the singles division on Raw as the years progress. Hell, she would be a great choice to be the one to dethrone Lyra Valkyria as Women's Intercontinental Champion. But Kairi isn't the only women's tag team act in current-day WWE who could get a major boost by going solo and going after a singles belt. No, the exact same thing could be said about our next subject too, Scotland's own Alba Fyre. Now again, like with Kairi Sane, if you've been following Alba Fyre's career for any length of time, then you'll know that she's more than capable of being a solo star. After all, it was back during her days on the UK indie circuit that she first built up a name for herself as Kaylee Ray, and this would be enough to see her eventually find herself moving over to the NXT UK roster, where she'd win the NXT UK Women's Championship on one occasion after beating the mighty Toni Storm for the honor. Since being called up to America, though, her time has been largely spent as part of a tag team, mostly with her fellow countrywoman Isla Dawn. Not that this has been a bad thing for her, of course. No, it's been enough to see her win tag team gold on more than one occasion, but throughout that period, there has always been a sense that WWE could be doing more with Fyre, and now that Isla Dawn has been released from her contract, this feeling has only intensified. Still, as things stand today, she's yet to get that solo push on the main roster. No, right now, she's been moved over to another stable, the one being led by Chelsea Green. But this doesn't mean that will be her lot forever going forward. No, with Chelsea already having a great star and yet another Scotswoman, Piper Niven, it feels like Alba's inclusion into this storyline could be a way of building her up for a big heel run in the long term. Come on now, we can all picture it. Chelsea Green continues to get great reactions from live crowds on SmackDown, with this leading her eventually becoming a babyface, only for her to then be turned on by Alba Fyre. And at that point, Fyre could even take her Women's United States Championship away from her. It would certainly be a great way to give the Scottish star that boost she needs to fully become a singles player in WWE, and would allow us all a good reason to get behind the hot mess even more. Really, it's such a perfect idea, it almost feels like it'll be a disappointment if it doesn't happen. And that's why we hope it does sooner rather than later. After all, Alba Fyre has paid her dues by now, and it's long past time for her to get her run. We're not necessarily saying she needs to be a world champion or anything, but she should be given the chance to go solo on the big stage at least once before her career is over. And we can't think of a better time to do it than sometime in 2025. And she's not the only person on the current WWE main roster who feels like she's got an imminent solo run coming up. No, that statement also applies to our next subject, the one, the only, Otis. Yes, we know this one happened already once before back in 2020, but that's largely been memory wiped to this point on account of it happening in 2020, even if it was one of the better storylines of that time period. That's right, back when Otis first went solo from his original Heavy Machinery tag partner Tucker, it looked like he was going to break out to that next level, especially as this was when he had Mandy Rose by his side. In the end though, things would falter for the big man here, and that would eventually see the reset button be pressed as come the end of that year, he'd be forming a union with his real-life close friend, Chad Gable. Of course, as time went on and Chad Gable started leaning more and more towards being a heel, it put stress on the pair's relationship. And all this would ultimately climax in a situation where, in the summer of 2024, Alpha Academy exploded when, following Gable's alignment with the Creed brothers, Otis, as well as his other stablemates Maxine Dupree and Akira Tozawa, refused to stand by his side. Needless to say then, this led to beatdowns for the holdouts, the worst of which was saved for Otis himself. What has the Duluth native been doing since then? Well, he's continued to team with Tozawa and Dupree as something of a mid-card babyface tag team act. But really, this doesn't seem like the best fit for him in the long run. No, the best fit for him still very much feels like it would be as a solo act. After all, WWE could do a lot with a lovable big man who has a sense of humor right now, especially as it doesn't look like Big E is going to be wrestling again anytime soon. And while Akira Tozawa is a great wrestler, the way he's presented only means he's dragging his partner down. So WWE may be thinking about alternative plans right about now. Just imagine Otis getting into a program with Braun Breaker, or even a rivalry with Gunther. We have no doubt this would get the fans excited, and it might give the company a chance to right some of the wrongs of 2020 by finally getting the big man to that next level he should have gotten to before the world shut down for about a year and a half. At very least, it would freshen up his character a little and give him a new goal to go after, so we hope this one does take place sometime in the near future. But what of the other side of that Alpha Academy American-made situation? The heel side, which involves Chad Gable and the Creed brothers. Well, here lies our next subject as it happens, because we can very much see a future for WWE in which Julius Creed is a big-time solo star. Why Julius Creed and not his tag team partner and brother Brutus Creed? Well, let us explain that by going back and telling the pair's history. Yes, both Creed brothers have been star athletes since their days studying at Lexington High School, where both excelled in amateur wrestling. And once those days were gone, both would move on over to the world of WWE in 2020 when they signed on the dotted line with Vince McMahon, and were from there shipped down to NXT to be a part of the Diamond Mine. But while both showed a lot of promise here, there was always a sense that Julius Creed had just that little bit more to offer, kind of like how Scott Steiner always seemed like he was going to be the breakout act of the Steiner brothers, or how Bret Hart was very clearly going to be the one who did the most once the Hart Foundation split. These things can just be sensed sometimes, and while this hasn't led to a split between the pair yet, what with them now being part of a trio alongside Chad Gable on Raw, they're both still very young, and so both have a long career ahead of them. Because of this then, we expect that within the next couple of years, the push will start to be made for Julius Creed moving in more of a solo direction. And once that happens, expect big things from the Ohio native, as he certainly has all the skills required in the ring. Sure, he's still a work in progress, but even at this stage he's at now, there's every indication he could be a newer version of someone like a Shelton Benjamin or a Chad Gable in future years to come. Hell, we could certainly see him winning a mid-card title at some point, and we could also see him at least becoming a challenger for a world title. And who knows, those stars could always align in the right way that allowed him to do even more than this by actually winning a top prize. That said, even if this never happens, Julius Creed seems destined to have a bright future as a solo star, even if this may mean his brother suffers in the long term as a result. But then there's nothing to say the Creed brothers can't reunite for a legacy run somewhere down the line after their inevitable breakup. Yes, the split of a tag team doesn't have to be a disaster for one of the parties involved. No, in an ideal world, it should help both out in the long run, and we certainly hope this is what happens here. But let's move back to NXT for a second, as it's there we find one half of one of the best tag teams going today, a team in which it certainly seems like one member is certainly destined for singles success above the other. Who are we talking about here? Why, who else but Fraxium, and their future solo star, Nathan Frazer, of course. Now, Nathan Frazer's career goes back a lot further than his time with Fraxium, even if he has only been wrestling since 2018. And that's because during his early years, he was very much a solo act as he wrestled for places like TNA and enhancement talent roles, all while making a couple of cameo appearances on AEW Dark 2 while he was at it. Even when he signed with WWE in 2020 to become a member of the NXT UK roster, the Channel Islands native largely wrestled in singles action. That said, for as great of an experience as this was for him, there was always the sense there was going to be a ceiling on what Nathan was going to achieve as a solo act at this early point in his career within the WWE system. So that's why it turned out to be the best thing for him when, in 2023, he was paired up with Spanish star Axiom to form Fraxium. After all, well, both men were good alone. Once together, they managed to unlock another level of talent within each other. And this saw them quickly become one of the most exciting parts of the NXT brand during the 2.0 era. Seriously, while that show often struggled with its fan base during the early days, Fraxium was always considered great by anyone with a pair of eyes. And this saw them get over enough to where they'd be given the NXT Tag Team titles on 2 separate occasions. Of course, as time has gone on though, and they've started to do everything they can as a team, the question has started being asked, is it time for the pair to go solo? We've no doubt this will be the end result for Fraxium, whether they get a run as a team on the main roster or not. And when this does happen, we feel it'll be Nathan Frazer who breaks out to a bigger level as a singles act. Not because Axiom isn't great in his own right, no, he's very special too, but it's always been a little easier to become a star in WWE if your face isn't hidden under a mask, so it really does seem like Frazer is going to have a leg up over his partner in that respect. What will Nathan Frazer's ceiling be as a solo wrestler in WWE by then? Well, the sky's the limit. At very least, he should be in contention for a mid-card title, and with the kinds of matches he can no doubt have against the likes of a Rey Mysterio or Rey Fenix, he should be able to wow crowds on the regular, with this only increasing his stock. But what about another current member of the NXT roster? One whose focus is less on high-flying theatrics and more on ground-based grappling. Doesn't he deserve a spot in this video today? Why, yes he does, and that's exactly why our next subject is none other than Miles Bourne. Yes, if you've been following NXT over the last couple of years, then you'll be all too familiar with the No Quarter Catch crew, the developmental brand's group of shooter-style wrestlers. After all, they've been a pretty consistent presence on that show since their formation in 2023. And of all of their members, one who appears to have one of the brighter futures is Miles Bourne. Why is that? Well, right now, we've not really seen him break out into singles action yet, mostly just play tag team partner to stablemates like Charlie Dempsey and Tavion Heights. He's shown there that he has a lot of natural aptitude for the ring, despite him still being so relatively inexperienced. And with William Regal once more being a part of NXT now, allowing him to train this young generation again, there's no limit to what Bourne can learn in the future as he continues to improve. Yes, give it a couple of years and Miles Bourne will have likely improved exponentially, with this making him more than ready to try out his hand at being a singles wrestler for a while. Sure, it would be sad to see him have to part ways with the No Quarter Catch crew, but then maybe he wouldn't have to do this. No, maybe he could remain affiliated with them all while exploring solo opportunities, much in the same way that Charlie Dempsey is doing right now. And if that happens, a Heritage Cup win has to be in the North Carolinians' future at the very least. As to what might happen after that, well, once he inevitably gets called up to the main roster, Bourne will probably be seeking out mid-card gold to start off with, all before then no doubt trying to move up the ladder to even bigger things. Because he's so young right now, it's impossible to know just how high he'll go before all is said and done. One thing we can be sure of, however, is that he'll be given plenty of opportunities, as WWE has to know they have a very talented performer in him, someone who could potentially go all the way to the top of the mountain if things work out. And while he's doing this over in the men's division, in the women's, another current-day NXT star who's part of a team will probably be looking to find singles success on the main roster too, as by that point, we expect she'll have proven she deserves such a chance. Who are we talking about this time? Who else but Lash Legend? That's right, while she may have had a rocky start in NXT, in the last year or so, Lash Legend has started to turn things around and prove that she really can be a star of tomorrow in WWE. And the way she's largely done this has been by joining up with Noam Dar, Ora Mensah, and Jakara Jackson to form the Metaphor. Why has this been such a positive for the former college basketball player's career? Well, because it's allowed her to continue learning her craft, all while not having to have the sole focus be on her over time. Of course, eventually though, we imagine she very much wants the sole focus to be on her. And that's why we expect there will come a day where she chooses to part ways with Metaphor, either through amicable means or as part of a heel turn. Whatever path she chooses, we're sure the end result will be the same, and that result will be her getting a push into the singles division. Really, it's just a case of how high will she rise at this point. Will she be able to win any gold on the developmental brand? And if she does this, how long will it be before WWE then decides to call her up to the main roster so she can get a chance to lock it up with the likes of Bianca Belair and Io Sky? We might not have to wait years for this to happen. And when it does, it will truly be a case of the Atlanta native being given the ball to run with. Yes, it's entirely possible that before the decade is out, Lash Legend is fighting over main roster gold on a WrestleMania card. As for Lash's Metaphor stablemates, well, we're sure they'll all have success to varying degrees too, but we're inclined to think she might get the hardest push of them all. And that will put her right in the same category as everyone else we've looked at today, as they each represent a little bit of the future of what the singles division in WWE might one day look like.